Golden State Media Concepts bring you Book Review Podcast, a haven for bookworms of all ages and the widest genres, from mystery to memoirs, romance to comedy, fantasy to sci-fi. If you love to read, this is a podcast for you. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Sarah, and I hope you are having a great week so far. Well, so far, I mean, it's Thursday, so the week is almost over. Maybe I just meant I hope you've been having a great week since we chatted on Tuesday when we had the last episode. Yeah, I don't know what I'm saying clearly. So it's Thursday, and I hope it's a great Thursday. Let's just go with that. Hope your week has been going well. If it's spring break for you or your kids, I hope that's going well. It's almost Easter, and so that often involves travel for some people. Just, a lot of things going on. The weather is starting to hopefully get nice for you, etc., etc. But we're not here to talk about the weather. We're not here to talk about Easter. We're here to talk about books because it is the Book Review Podcast. And I have an author interview for you today. As I mentioned on Tuesday, today's interview is with author Priscilla Oliveras about the second book in her Match to Perfection series. It's called Her Perfect Affair. And the description is as follows. Rosa Fernandez does not act on impulse. She's the responsible one, planning her career with precision, finally landing a job as the librarian at conservative Queen of Peace Academy, and confining her strongest emotions to her secret poetry journal. But she's been harboring a secret crush on dreamy Jeremy Taylor, and after one dance with him at her sister's wedding, Rosa longs to let loose for the first time. She deserves some fun, after all, so what if she doesn't have a shot with Jeremy, not with his wealthy pedigree and high-profile lifestyle? But one dance leads to one kiss, and soon Rosa is head over heels. That is the description of Her Perfect Affair, the second in the Match to Perfection series. The first book is called His Perfect Partner, and that is about Yasmin and Tomas. Yasmin is the oldest sister in the Fernandez family, so this is a trilogy, Rosa Fernandez, and then the second one, this that we're talking about today, Her Perfect Affair, is about Rosa, and then the third one, which comes out in December, and Priscilla will talk about all of these in the interview, is about the youngest sister, Lily. So there are three books, and then there's a novella also about a Fernandez cousin, and that's also coming out around December, sometime in December, because it's in a holiday collection of novellas. So good stuff. If you find yourself reading this book and find yourself loving the Fernandez family, just know that you've got several opportunities to get to know them better. This is the second in the trilogy, but they are written, Priscilla says they are written as effectively standalone novels. You don't have to have read the first one. And while I have the first one, I haven't had a chance to read it yet. And I don't feel like I mean, obviously there's a backstory there and I will go back and read it, but I don't feel like I'm just missing tons of information when I read this second book. It is obviously a romance, as you can tell from the back of the book, the book description that I just read. A couple of things that I really like about this story. First of all, Rosa is a librarian, and as you know, my dad's a librarian, so that just touches my heart. Yay. Well, I love librarians. Librarians are awesome. I actually contemplated becoming a librarian for a while and looked into the Master of Library Sciences degree. It's I don't know, that was 1.5 billion years ago. It's probably different now, but I thought about it for a minute and then I chose a different path. But I have a soft spot in my heart for librarians, so I already loved Rosa before I even started reading the book. It's also Priscilla describes her work as romance with a Latinx flair. So, if you couldn't tell from the last name of Fernandez, the Fernandez girls are Latina. They're Puerto Rican, And so there is a good mixture of some Spanish language thrown in. There's Puerto Rican culture. It's a family who's Puerto Rican, so obviously we get they live in Chicago, so we get a view into their life, and it's really nice to have main characters who are people of color. We so often get so fixated in every genre of, we don't often have people of color well represented. So it's wonderful when you get characters who represent different cultures, different ethnicities, different stories, different family styles. That's one thing that I really, really appreciated about this book. And I got to learn a couple new Spanish phrases. My Spanish is deplorable. I know very few things in it, but it's nice to brush up on the few things that I do know and learn a couple of phrases. So as always, I know I always say this, but enough out of me. Let's turn to that interview with Priscilla Oliveras. And just as, heads up, it's nothing major, but Priscilla was in a kind of noisy location when we were doing our interview. There's really only one time as I was editing that I could hear some stuff in the background. It was while Priscilla was speaking, so I couldn't edit that out, but I listened to it through headphones and it didn't seem distracting to me. So just know that you may hear a little bit of noise, another voice in the background. It's not a ghost or anything. No, it's not a podcast ghost. Just a bit of a noisy location, but it shouldn't distract too much, and it's very brief. So that's my warning. Let's turn now to the interview with author Priscilla Oliveras about her second book in the Match to Perfection series, Her Perfect Affair. Hi, Priscilla. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat with you.
I'm excited as well. It's wonderful to have you here. So we are here to talk about your second book in the Match to Perfection series called Her Perfect Affair. But before we get to the books, I would love for my listeners to get to know you a little bit better. So if you could just share a little bit about yourself and your life.
Sure. My name's Priscilla Oliveras. I'm a Florida girl, born and raised, though, kind of all over because my dad was in the Navy. So we moved around a lot. My mom's from Puerto Rico. My dad is kind of Mexican-American, Tex-Mex from San Antonio, Texas. So we grew up in our house kind of a mix of Hispanic, Latino culture and military culture and a wide variety of places. I've been writing for a long, long time. I'm a mom with 3 grown daughters, so I like to think that parental experience and all the time that I've spent writing and waiting, to sell and to publish has just kind of given me more fodder for my writing. I think if you read my bio, it tells you a little bit about me. I'm a huge sports fan. I love to go to the beach. And I am really good at taking naps in our backyard hammock.
Now that sounds awesome. I like that plan. So talk about Her Perfect Affair, which, as I said, is the second in the Match to Perfection series.
Yes. Her Perfect Affair is the story about Lily. I've just finished turning in Lily, so Lily's kind of in my brain. So Her Perfect Affair is actually Rose's story. She's the middle sister, and in the Match to Perfection series, each of the books features one of the 3 Fernandez sisters. Book 1 was Yasmin, book 2 is all Roses, but you'll see all 3 girls. They'll have family dinners together, or they'll be on the phone talking with each other. So you get to see all 3 girls in all of the stories, but Her Perfect Affair is purely Rosa's love story with Jeremy, her hero, and Rosa is my kind of shy librarian, but when she needs to put her foot down and speak up, she does. That's something Jeremy learns right away. She's the reliable one, the one everybody can count on to get things done. And at the very beginning of the story, she's kind of itching to maybe step out of that role, or at least to kind of go for something that she's really wanted for a long time. And that is to kind of connect with Jeremy. And so she makes a move, and like what can kind of happen to a lot of us in real life, you try to go for something or step outside of your comfort zone, and sometimes there's consequences that you didn't anticipate, no matter how much you tried to cover all your bases, and that's what happens with Rosa and Jeremy. They have some consequences that they face together. I think at first in the book, what's going on is they want to face them in different ways. But I really love the way Publishers Weekly, in their review, one of the things that they mentioned was they thought it's a book about good people trying to make difficult choices. And so that's kind of the gist of Rosa and Jeremy's story. They're both really good people. So honestly, it was kind of hard to write because I love Rosa so much. I didn't want to put conflict in her way. And as an author, we kind of know if there's no conflict, then your story is over.
Right.
And so actually there was a point where I had to kind of distance myself from how much I care for Rosa as a person and look at it as an author and what do I need to do to make her story better and to make it better for readers.
Right.
But so ultimately I hope at the end that readers will kind of come to care for her as much as I do.
And I know we just got started with the interview with Priscilla and her description of the book and the series, but it is time to take that first break of the podcast. When we come back, we'll be talking more about the main characters, Rosa and Jeremy, and some of the things that they go through and some of their experiences that affect their lives, their relationship, and the situation that they find themselves in as they start getting to know each other, becoming a couple, etc. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and we'll be right back.
Do you want to be healthier, yet you just don't know what to do? All these shows telling you this and that, but nothing seems to work. Well, listen close. Golden State Media Concepts has got something great for you. The Health and Wellness Podcast dedicated to workout trends, healthy eating habits, diet, and everything about healthy living. Join us in our banters as we help you not just live life to the fullest, but live it to the healthiest.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast. I am speaking today with Priscilla Oliveras about her second book in the Match to Perfection trilogy. It's called Her Perfect Affair, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the main characters, Rosa and Jeremy. Rosa and Jeremy are interesting characters in that, I mean, Rosa's pretty much your very typical middle child. You know, she's kind of the peacekeeper in the family. She doesn't rock the boat too much, etc., until the consequences of that you were just talking about. But she and Jeremy also have different levels of guilt in their lives that influences how they react to this situation. So Rosa has guilt about her mother's death combined with some Catholic guilt, and Jeremy has guilt about his parentage, that his father was, his biological father was just kind of a horrible human being. And so they both bring that into their relationship.
Yeah, I think what I try to do, and what a lot of authors do is look for what are some universal conflicts, universal feelings that we can give our characters so that they will resonate with readers. And I can say as a cradle Catholic, I do Catholic guilt very well, so I identified with Rosa in that respect. But I think that issue of guilt, and whether it's with our family, whether it's with close friends, whether it's with mentors, and when you try to do, sometimes it's not always easy to do what you think is right for someone else, but when what might be right for you is something different. And especially with Jeremy, that's kind of what he struggles with, guilt over trying to follow a path that was right for him, but it was a completely different path than his family expected him to, or that he assumed they would always expect him to, and how he dealt with that as a young man wasn't necessarily the right way. And so, yeah, I think what I tried to do especially with these two, that issue of guilt that you carry with maybe when you feel like you have not lived up to a loved one's expectations. I think that's something that a lot of readers might be able to identify with.
Yeah, thank you for that. Jeremy and Rosa are also interesting in that they come from very different backgrounds. They come from different circles in society. In Chicago, they come from different religious backgrounds. They come from different ethnic backgrounds. Can you talk a little bit about the challenge of writing the dynamic between them in terms of their very different backgrounds?
As far as the ethnic background, mostly, I don't really know that I have yet tackled that as that would be an issue. I think one of the things that Rosa worried about was coming from different socioeconomic circles, in that Jeremy's family is in the limelight in Chicago quite a bit, and she's quiet and she's shy and she's used to being in what she thinks of as her other two more outgoing sisters' shadows. So that was an internal conflict for Rosa to have to deal with, that she saw it as an external conflict, but really it was mostly a hang-up that she needed to figure out how she could deal with, because she does have that concern of, will she fit in? Will she be looked at in as less than? But honestly, from Jeremy's perspective, that never even enters into his psyche. I think that is what makes him hero material, is that the idea that Rosa would be less than because she comes from middle class, suburbs, is not even anything that would enter, on his radar. He just views her as a person. Now, for him, he one of the reasons, his backstory, that he left the Chicago area, and it's how he wound up meeting Yasmin, the heroine from book one, is when they lived in New York City. But for him, it was to get away from that limelight and being under, how could I say, people are always wanting to know what he was up to because of his family name. And so, it turns out that that's something that they kind of have in common, that Rosa didn't think about, at least in the beginning. And really, I think that's mostly a hang-up that she has to overcome and learn to deal with.
Thank you for that. So let's talk a little bit about the series as a whole. The first one is out, and that, as you said, is about the older sister, Yasmin. Can you talk a little bit about that story?
Sure. Yasmin and Tomas, their story is his perfect partner. So the series goes his perfect partner, her perfect affair, and then book 3, which will come out later this year, it's actually a December release, is their perfect melody. And Yasmin and Tomas's story, I'll say Yasmin was the genesis for the series as a whole. She just came to me as a character, and the more I got to know her, and I learned that she had 2 sisters, and I learned about their relationship with their mommy and papi, their mom and dad, I knew that I wanted to tell all of the girls' story, and I wanted to spend more time with the Fernandez family. So then I hoped that readers would want to as well. But Yasmin is a Broadway dancer. In book 1, she has come back home because papi is dealing with cancer. The girl's mom died when they were younger, when Yasmin and Rosa were in high school. Mommy died in a car accident. So it's just the 3 sisters and their dad, papi. And papi has cancer. Yasmin comes back home because Rosa and Lily are in college. That's kind of what she's saying on the surface. But in actuality, she's kind of going through a crisis of wondering if this path to stardom on the stage is the right one for her. It's one that her whole family expects for her, because it's a dream that she's had for a while, and her parents made lots of sacrifices for her to be there. So again, she knows if she changes her plan, would she be disappointing loved ones and all those who expect her to go and make it big? So she's come back home to take care of papi, but she's also come back home internally trying to regain her confidence and go back to tackle her career as a Broadway dancer and make her family proud. But while she's home, she is volunteering at her old dance studio, and she's got a class of 5 and 6-year-olds, and one of her students is Maria, whose father is Tomas, who becomes Yasmin's hero. And so Tomas is a single dad. He's an ad executive in Chicago. He is kicking butt in his career, but he's realizing that focusing so much on career is also hurting the amount of time that he wants to be able to spend with his daughter. And so the book itself there are a lot of family themes, I think mostly because that's important to me in my life, so it kind of bleeds into my stories as well. But it's a story about two people who, in the beginning, they feel like they're on completely different paths, and they ultimately have to come to a place where hopefully they realize maybe their paths are entwined, and the perfect person is right there for them.
Okay, thank you. And then the third book you said comes out in December, and that is about the youngest sister, Lily. Can you talk a little bit about that without, giving too much away?
Sure. The last book is Their Perfect Melody, and this is Lily. And we flash forward a few years, and Lily has now graduated from college, and she is working as a victims advocate in Chicago. And kind of the story is about what happens when the victims advocate, with her rose-colored glasses firmly in place, rubs up against a street-smart Chicago cop who has a knack for playing classical guitar. And together they kind of wind up realizing that they might just be able to make perfect music.
Okay, thank you. You live currently in Florida, so what went into your decision to set this series in Chicago?
Well, when I started the series, I was actually still living in southern Illinois, but mostly I think Chicago is one of my top favorite cities in the U.S. It kind of rivals. It's up there with D.C. and New York City, but in Chicago there is a large Puerto Rican population, and so I think it was a combination of I love the city. It was I was living nearby, and I did kind of want them to be near a larger city, especially if Yasmin wound up trying to decide to stay and maybe do dance in that area. So I think it just was a combination, really the same way that kind of Yasmin just danced into my imagination. The city of Chicago was just there, and it just felt like it was the right place for the girls to be.
Okay. So now you know a lot more about the Fernandez sisters and the Fernandez family and this trilogy that is about them, why it's set in Chicago, etc. We are going to take our second break of the podcast, but stay tuned. When we come back, I will be asking a very awkward question that I can't figure out how to quite phrase. So you want to tune in for the awkwardness. You are listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and we will be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and we're just going to go ahead and get back to the interview, the conclusion of the interview with author Priscilla Olivares. And I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this question because I'm going to sound like a total nerd. But
no worries.
So the family, the girls are all bilingual. They speak both English and Spanish, and so there's Spanish sprinkled throughout the book, which is fun because it helps me to. I have very, very rudimentary Spanish, so I get to try to kind of figure out what they're talking about before I read on and see what your translation is. As a person who's not bilingual, I assume you write kind of how you would speak maybe with your own family. See, this is where I'm trying to figure out. How do you kind of figure out where those Spanish phrases come into play?
You mean like when will I sprinkle in Spanish?
Right. Is it just sort of natural to the way you write and speak, or is there a specific reason behind some of it? Or I like I said, I'm having a weird time phrasing this question.
Oh no, that's a great question, and really, I would say for me, it must. I haven't thought about that, so it's interesting that you bring that up, because honestly, I would probably just say it's how I think. Mm-hmm. When I'm with friends that I know speak Spanish, our Spanglish kind of goes back and forth. I will say my abuela used to not like that at all because she only spoke Spanish. So when we would slip into Spanglish in conversations, she could miss part of the conversation. So it's really important to be aware of who you're speaking with, so that, but predominantly with my family now, and with close girlfriends that, we can go back and forth from English to Spanish. So it's not even really a conscious thing for me. And so I guess I just, with the sisters, because they are, and the same thing in book 3, Diego is Puerto Riqueño, and so he can slip in and out of Spanish. What I do try to do is, if I use Spanish in my book, now, when I say something in Spanish, I don't automatically repeat it in English because I know what it means. However, I know that there will be readers like you who don't speak Spanish. So I need to have the translation in there, but I want it to sound natural so that a reader who is bilingual doesn't feel like, why is she repeating this? I already know what she said.
Right.
So my hope is that I have done a good enough job in putting the translation in there in a natural way that it's not intrusive to someone who's bilingual, but yet someone who is not bilingual doesn't feel like she or he is missing something. So my hope is that that worked for you.
It did, and I think that's why it caught my attention, was because, I would see the Spanish phrases, and some of them I could kind of puzzle through myself, but then I knew that I wouldn't have to be confused because I knew you would bring up the translation somehow in the context of the story. I read a book a while back, and there was a really important scene that kind of explained everything, and it was entirely in Spanish. And so I had absolutely no idea what the heck just happened until they made a movie of it. And my best friend and I went to the movie, and when that scene came, we both said, "Oh," really loud.
Oh my God.
That's what happened.
Well, yikes. Well, I will share with you that my editor did ask me, did we think that we might want to put like a vocabulary is not the right, but some kind of index that listed
like
the Spanish words and put them in English. Yeah, like a glossary. My fear was that if someone saw that then they might think, oh gosh, there's a lot of Spanish in here. I better not read this book. It's going to confuse me. So I'm not really sure. I think that's something that I would want to ask readers. Would they have benefited had there been a glossary, or do I do an okay job? And do I do an okay job and they follow along well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I followed along, so I thought you did an okay job, but I can't speak for other readers, of course. You just finished Lily's book. It comes out in December. Are you working on something else right now?
Yes, actually, I am working on, I will have in May with Thule Publishing. I am working on a series with Shirley Jump, Kira Jacobs, and Susan Meyer. We have a series called Paradise Key, and it features 4 childhood friends who are reunited in this small beach town, and where they wind up discovering, our tagline is "Love is better at the beach." And I will be book 3 in the Paradise Key series. It's a reunion love story between Sofia Vargas and Nate Hamilton, and the title of the book is Resort to Love. So that's available in May. by Tooley. And then actually later this year, I'm really also blessed to be able to be participating. I will have a novella in Fern Michaels' holiday anthology.
Oh, okay.
And that book title is A Season to Celebrate, and it'll feature a novella by, obviously, Fern Michaels, Donna Kaufman, and Kate Pierce. And then I'll have one as well. And in my novella, it's titled Holiday Home Run. Readers will get to meet a Fernandez cousin, and Julia Fernandez will come to visit the sisters in Chicago over the holidays. And while she's there, Julia is an event planner. While she's there, she winds up finding her perfect match with an ex-baseball player named Ben Thomas. And so the title of that novella is Holiday Home Run. And that one I had a really fun time. I was listening to a lot of our Spanish Christmas songs, and I kind of I got to pull out some of our Puerto Rican holiday traditions and sprinkle that in throughout the book. So that novella was a lot of fun to write. And that one will be coming out in November.
Oh, okay, so you've got a lot of stuff coming up. That's exciting.
It's a busy year. I'm super excited. Lots of good blessings.
Yeah, so when we were chatting by email before the interview, you mentioned that you have a group on Facebook, called the Four Chicas Chat Group. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. Thank you so much for asking about that. I'll say Four Chicas Chat has come about. One thing that's amazing about the romance industry is the camaraderie and the support that you find amongst fellow authors. It's something I've experienced throughout my membership. As I've been a longtime member of Romance Writers of America, and it's kind of what brought the four of us chicas together. And all four, we are Sabrina Soul, Alexis Daria, Mia Sosa, and myself. We're four Latina romance authors, so we write contemporary romance, and that's part of what ties us together. But what we decided to do is form together to create this Facebook group. And so it's a Facebook page for people who are writers or readers of romance, or those who like to hang out with writers and readers of romance, or those who like to have fun, lively conversations where we'll talk about our books, we'll talk about our lives, we might talk about something motivational or inspirational. Maybe we'll talk about a great movie that we're going to see. Really just a fun space to hang out. Our group is the number 4, and then Four Chicas Chat. And actually, we're kicking off on Monday, March 26th. We're having a casa warming, like a housewarming party from 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern in the space. And then we will keep the doors to the house open, and we'll be posting. Hopefully our members will post as well, just motivational stuff, positive stuff, like I said, a space. And a lot of authors have reader groups on Facebook. I'm lucky. I'm also part of another one called Fiction from the Heart that has 12 of us there that, again, create a space for writers and readers and people to meet and talk about, things that are important to them. And so Four Chicas Chat is along the same line. Yes, we'll talk a little bit about our Hispanic culture, but that's just one of the many things that we'll talk about in the Four Chicas Chat space.
Okay, thank you. So those groups are open. People can go and either like the page or join the group?
Yep. If you like the group, join the group. I think we have it open to the public right now, and then just for a little bit of privacy for those who want to post things on Monday, right before the casa warming, we'll make it private so that any pictures and things like that will stay within the Four Chicas Chat group. But all you have to do is click to join, and one of the four of us will approve you to come in and join the conversation.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. You mentioned earlier that you've kind of been writing for a long time, maybe your whole life. So it's something that you've always wanted to do? And how did it kind of come about that you did finally start writing to be published?
Well, I started writing maybe like short stories, short little romance stories in high school. I remember in the 11th grade, one of my teachers asked me if I thought about becoming a writer, and went on to college and started majoring in English to be an English teacher. But the very first time I sat down to to write a book. I was married young. I was a military spouse. We had a new baby, and I had to take a semester off of college. I was still in my undergrad, and but was a long time romance reader. And during that semester, I realized that I needed to be working on something. I had been going to school full time and was a new mom, and so I needed something to fill that space. And that was when I first started putting my fingers to the electronic typewriter, long before I had a laptop. And at that point, I'll be honest, I didn't know anything about Romance Writers America, about the romance writing craft. I had a lot to learn, but it's what started me on. And that was my oldest was a little one, and now she's 27, so it was a long time ago. I will say since then I've written whenever I could, but I've raised kids and gotten degrees and all that kind of stuff. Really, it wasn't until probably I started my MFA at Seton Hill University that I was able to really focus, and I would probably say serious pursuit of romance writing. By then, my kids were older. My youngest was a couple of years shy of going off to college, and so I had a little bit more time to focus on things that I wanted to do. Because while my kids were in the house, it was I spent a lot of my time either doing things with them or volunteering, and then when you have a day job, there are only 24 hours in the day.
Mm-hmm.
So I say I've been writing a really long time, but seriously, probably just since maybe 2011.
Okay. Do you have advice for other authors?
Yes. I guess really the two big things that I teach an online class called Romance Writing for Sungage Learning, or it's Ed2Go. And one of the things that we talk about in the very first lessons are the importance of reading within our genre. You can't really be a romance writer. I don't think you could be a horror writer if you're not well read, and if you don't, as yourself, have reader expectations or understand what other readers are expecting. So read, but also write. And I think, yes, there could be a lot of rejection as far as if you're seeking maybe traditional publishing. When I first started out, that was your only avenue. And a lot of people say, well, it could be really lonely. Just writing by yourself in your laptop. And to that, I say that the value of finding other writers, other authors, joining other organizations. And as a longtime member of Romance Writers of America, now I'm lucky to be on the national board. So obviously I'm a big proponent of RWA, but so much of what I have learned about our craft, about our industry business-wise, the majority of my writing mentors and friends have come from RWA or through Seton Hill and their Seton Hill University and our writing popular fiction program. So the value of reading a lot within your genre, of honing your craft and taking lessons or going to presentations and practicing your craft, and the value of getting out there and meeting other authors to learn from them, for you to teach them from what you've learned. Those are kind of for me, I would say that's the trifecta of how to keep on keeping on no matter what's going on, in your life or in your professional career. Those three things.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned reading in your genre, so I assume that you probably read quite a bit of romance. Who are your favorite authors when you sit down to read for pleasure?
Sure. Hands down, probably my number one favorite, and my 1 and 2 are Kristen Higgins and Suzanne Brockmann. I discovered Suzanne Brockmann's Troubleshooter series years ago, and one thing I love about that series is a similar thing I love about Kristen's, is their characters are ones that come to life for me. And so they're on my keeper shelf because those characters, I feel like I know them like they're my friends, and I want to go spend time with them again, even though I may have already read their books. So Kristen Higgins and Suzanne Brockman, probably my 1 and 2. Rounding out my top 5 would be people like Sonali Dev, Beverly Jenkins, Falguni Kathari, and Alyssa Cole. They're just powerhouses in the romance genre, and so I can't recommend their books enough. I think I mean, you could go on and on, because honestly, I feel there's so many amazing authors in our industry. I would obviously recommend any of the 4 chicas, so Sabrina or Alexis or Mia, as well as any of the other 11 authors that are in the Fiction from the Heart. We have some authors in there that have published 60 books. When you look at someone like Barbara Samuel, she's in the Fiction from the Heart. But that group of, I feel very lucky to be a part of that group because of the mentorship. If I have questions, they're willing to answer. It's a good support system. So if anybody's looking for a book for this week, if you're heading off on spring break, or if you're listening to this a little bit later and you're looking for a book for the weekend, I would recommend any of the Fiction from the Heart authors, any of the 4 Chicas chats, or any of the other ones that I've just listed. You won't be disappointed.
Perfect. Thank you. Where can people, and it sounds like quite a few places, where can people find you on the internet and social media?
Sure. I would love for you to come find me. I have my website. I will say my first name, Priscilla, is one that is often misspelled. So on my website, on Facebook, on Instagram, and Twitter, you'll find me as Pris, P-R-I-S, Oliveras. That way there's no misspelling. But I have my official website, and then I'm fairly active on Twitter, probably sometimes too much. I need to make sure I put my phone on Do Not Disturb when it's time for me to start writing, because I can really dive into the social media distraction. But on Twitter and Instagram as Pris Oliveras, and I have my personal author Facebook page, but also I'm hanging out. Like this week, I am the house host for Fiction from the Heart, and this week then we're also kicking off the 4 Chicas chat. So on Facebook, you can find me in any of those 3 places, either my personal author page or either one of those 2 author groups.
Okay, thank you for that. Is there anything else that we haven't covered that you would like people to know about writing, about your books, about just really anything that we haven't covered?
Okay, gosh, that's like a big question.
Yes, it is.
And I'm a big talker. So there are times where I hang up and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, did I ramble too much? I guess really just with my books, some people have asked me, is there, how much of the Latino or like with the Spanish am I going to understand? And my tagline is sweet contemporary romance with a Latinx flavor. So I would just say really with my books, if you decide to spend some time with Yasmin and Tomas, or with Rosa and Jeremy, or any of the other ones that come later, they're written with a lot of heart and a little bit of Latino flavor and a lot of love for my characters. And my only hope is that when you get to the end and you've spent some time with them, that you've fallen in love with them as much as I have, and you've enjoyed time well spent.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to talk to me about your series, Matched to Perfection, as well as a couple of other upcoming things that you have. I really appreciate the time that you spent with me.
Oh, no, this has been a great opportunity. It was fun chatting. I look forward to maybe doing it again.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you so much. Once again, a huge thank you to my guest, Priscilla Oliveras, for taking the time out of her day, especially a day where she ended up talking to me in a noisy place because she had other things scheduled, and yet she kept the interview with me. So thank you so much, Priscilla, for doing that. I really appreciate it. And I actually took her away from her mom. She was having some time with her mom, and she took time out from spending time with her mom to talk to me about her book, so that you, my listeners, could hear about this series and this book. So thank you, Priscilla's mom. I don't know her first name. I apologize, for sharing your daughter with me and with the GSMC Book Review podcast listening world. I really appreciate it. So thank you to Priscilla. Thank you to Priscilla's mom. Thank you to you, my listeners, for tuning in. I hope you will join me again on Tuesday for a new episode. And I don't have an author interview scheduled for this weekend. It's Easter. And so I decided to not make any of my potential authors take time out of what could be a holiday weekend for them to do an interview. So no interviews this weekend, which is very different for me. But on Tuesday, I will be having an episode with co-host Stacy, who is new to the podcast world, and she's an even bigger book geek, lover, nerd, whatever you want to put in there. Whatever word, I can't even think of a word that's big enough. You know, she has a passion for books. She's even more of a book person than I am, I think. So it is so much fun to talk to Stacy. And we sat down recently to just talk about books in general and Harry Potter specifically. There's a lot of giggling and a lot of book talk. So please join us on Tuesday as Stacy and I talk about Harry Potter and giggle and enjoy being literary book nerds together. It's awesome. In the meantime, you can find all of our podcasts at www.gsmcpodcast.com. You can download those podcasts on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, any app that you use for your mobile device, anywhere you listen to podcasts, you can find us, and you can follow us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, and Instagram. We have a blog, gsmcbookreview.blogspot.com. All the author information for the authors that I interview is on that blog, their websites, their social media feeds, etc. Don't forget, we still have giveaways going. If you want a copy of Jim Heskett's Nail Gun Messiah from Tuesday's interview, you can go onto social media and enter into those giveaways. So check those out, please. Who doesn't love free books? Maybe, I don't know. Maybe you do. Maybe you don't love free books. In which case, you don't want to go to the giveaway. But free books are awesome, and you definitely want to go and sign up for the giveaways. Do it. It'll be fun. That's enough out of me. I am going to say goodbye for now, and I'll see you on Tuesday. In the meantime, enjoy your Easter weekend and spend part of it getting lost in a good book.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.